Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I felt Jesus leading me to make a video today talking about how life is like a classroom. And what I mean by that is we all have our own experiences, we all have our own trials, tribulations, and things that we go through in life as human beings. But what God has taught me is that the Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ himself, is the teacher. He's the creator of all, and his children who wholly submit to him and repent and come to him and give their lives and their hearts to him, they become his students and he becomes their teacher. And God has taught it to me like this. I'm in my own classroom, whereas his children, his other children, are in their own classrooms. And of course, we're all learning the same principles, right? Of like God's righteousness, God's holiness, repentance, and we all are on our own battlefield to overcome this flesh, to overcome temptation, the devil, and just, things that come in our life that God sends in our life, like fires and trials and tribulations to refine our character. And I'm speaking of those who sincerely go to Jesus and cry out to Jesus with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength and cling to him daily, seeking his will for their life completely every day. Okay, and then God has also taught me that there are souls, you guys. Everybody is in a classroom of their own, in their own life, whether they know it or not. And God is either their teacher, or they're listening to the influential voices of the world or of Satan, or it just depends on who they're surrounding themselves with and just, their upbringing and just everything like that. Like, I have learned that my classroom is my entire life experience that God has walked me through and has been with me through all along. Even in my rebellious years, God sees the future, and he knew that I was going to cry out to him. And so he used my own rebellion and my own choices, my own wickedness and selfishness, and having submitted to my flesh to teach me the lessons that I've learned that has gotten me this far in my own experience, that God himself, like I said, has walked me through. And through all of that, I've learned just the different gifts and anointings and just talents that God has given me that I am called every day to walk in and to grow in. Okay, so it just depends, but I'll just use one example that God has had me grow into a good listener. And it's by listening to the suffering hearts. So then he has taught me how to be an encouragement to the suffering. And I'm not saying that I understand everybody's suffering, because like I said, everyone has gone through their own experience. And so, but I learn in that way by listening to the needs of others' hearts and whatever God would be teaching me in those moments. So that's just an example of, let's say, a subject in my own classroom in my life that God himself has taught me. Okay, so God has given me several dreams, you guys, on this topic of how life is a classroom for various reasons. To either help encourage me in a really hot fire that I was going through at the time, or to even correct me and to chastise me and to teach me how my perspective on different things and trials and walks or whatever that I'm going through, trials, that my own perspectives can be completely different than God's perspective and God's way. So he was teaching me just different ways of submission, different parts of my heart that were needing growth. So, God used these dreams for so many reasons, and then he's used these dreams to teach me about just the different things that other people are going through and the lessons that they're having to learn, some that I've learned, others that I haven't. And then, just teaching me how lessons of the heart and how, the whole topic, the whole subject, the whole purpose and point of this life is love. And that's what God's people are striving to endure in this life, is to grow in God's love and in God's righteousness, holiness, and all of that into God's heart. But it's if you will, see it this way. It's like, imagine the heart of God being the diploma, that one receives at the end of this life. But in saying that, when people go through the different steps, of education, they're learning, they're ever growing, they're ever learning. Okay, so that's what it's like in God's school that I'm in. I'm continually learning and growing, and sometimes I fail a test, you guys, but I get do-overs, right? God gives me do-overs, especially when he sees that a heart is willing to do the do-over, when they've learned something from having failed a test, and then they actually apply that knowledge and counsel to the next test that comes along. And you see, that's where strength and patience gets built up in character too, because even through all the suffering, all the trials and fires and suffering, that's when a heart can be really refined, and when they're during suffering is when pride is knocked down, and when God can shine through. And that's really when he gets his most beautiful, teaching opportunity in that moment on a soul, is when a person is broken and when they're suffering. And then he can use it to teach them things about their own heart. And then he can use the sufferings of his people to teach, so many different things about other people's hearts too, around them, about love, about servitude, about forgiveness. I mean, you name it. God's got all the topics and the subjects that he just loves to use in a fire to not just refine the one person who is suffering or who is going through the experience, but to also teach those around this person. Okay, so it's almost like other people around them get to tap into the things that they're learning, that have conviction on their hearts too, right? To help them make decisions whether or not they are going to submit their heart and will to God's will in their own lives. So I mean, it's almost like everybody has their own assignments, is what I hear God saying, and their own burdens to carry, right? We all do. And with that being said, there are times when God does lead his people to come together and to work together as a family, to help each other through their assignments. And then other times he doesn't give that knowledge and understanding to his children about someone else's trial or fire. But God does expect and command, and naturally it comes to those who love him to want to be there and to be a support team for his other children, right? So because it's a family, it's an eternal family built by the Holy Spirit of God. And even if they're in their own classes, which they are, and they're going through their own fires, and they carry their own burdens, and they're going through their own, responsibilities and things that they have to go through every day in their own walk with God, they're still going to be there to support one another however God would lead. And sometimes, it just depends on each situation, but, it's like always knowing that there's going to be a support team there to help edify, encourage, and to love, and to refine each other like iron sharpens iron, right? So this is really what God's taught me. So I just want to talk a little bit about a couple of the dreams that I had of God's classroom. Okay, so my first dream, I had this several years ago. I was in God's classroom. Jesus was at the front. He's the teacher. I looked around. I noticed people that I know, and then I noticed people that I don't know. And it's like there were people there who were in my family, and people that I had gone to school with, and then just strangers that I don't know. In this classroom, Jesus was showing me how I had my own assignment, and that it was my duty to focus on my assignment. And because there were some in this classroom that were jumping on the desks, and they were getting distracted by life and by things of the world, and their things that were pulling on their heart. And even the devil was distracting some of them in these moments. So those scenes in movies where you see these classrooms where the children are making paper airplanes and they're throwing them across the class and everybody's just goofing off and stuff. Usually students, act that way when the teacher's out of the room. But right as soon as the teacher comes into the room, everybody just kind of shuts up and they go sit down at their desk. That's kind of what was going on here, except these students were having these type of behaviors with Jesus as the teacher sitting at the front, and they were being rebellious. Some of them were, and others were just like so distracted with, different thoughts and caught up in conversations that they weren't even meaning to act rebellious in that way. They were just allowing themselves to get distracted. So, it just depended on the person and their heart condition in that moment and what was going on with that person. But these are just some of the revelations that God gave me of how life is a classroom. And I remember Jesus telling me, Jackie, you need to focus on your paper, on your work here. I want you to do your work, because I was looking around. And he wasn't like chastising me for looking around. He was actually teaching me what was going on. And he was basically trying to say, I'm going to teach you how to remain focused. You're going to learn and grow more and more in how to remain focused with all this distraction going on. And I'm going to use you to teach other people things that I teach you. And again, knowing, you guys, that there are people out there who have been through such horrific things and experiences themselves, that God has told me I would have to go through certain things to even understand how these people were to feel, in order to relate to one another and to be a comfort and a counsel to hurting hearts, that I myself will go through much suffering. And I already have, a lot. You can ask Jesus. I have been through a lot of schooling of suffering. And I say that with a thankfulness and a testimony, to give God glory in this moment, to let you guys know, God has brought me through so much suffering that here I am today. All glory to Jesus, because he walked me through and he is my teacher and I listen to him. And I'm not saying that I don't get distracted in moments, okay? I'm not saying that I haven't even fallen into sin in moments, or even had moments of having to fight pride or any of that stuff, you guys. Of course, I have my own flesh that I still have to overcome every day, and that is something that that's something he was also having me focus on, keep focusing on your work, on your assignment, what I'm doing with you. And then, at the same time, he'll have me counsel others and help others and then learn from others, right? By listening to the hurting hearts. So it was God teaching me so many different things in this short dream that lasted about 2 minutes, probably, it felt like. And saying that, it's not like God and I were speaking to each other, having a conversation. I was just downloading this knowledge and this wisdom and this understanding within my spirit as the dream was unfolding. So I learned that there are so many different types of hearts who are just in their own place and situation and experiences, and they're going through their own battles and wars and their own class. But a lot of people, God did show me, a lot of people, a lot of people, okay, are distracted, and they're not asking Jesus how to get through their own assignment. And that's where I felt God's heart grieving in the dream, to where he's saying, look, I've made myself available. I've got my desk right here. People can come and approach me at any moment, day or night. It's free. They can come up. They can ask me anything that is on their heart. And it was he was telling me, I gave my life. I gave my life for this assignment for everyone. And there's a lot of people wasting time, a lot of people wasting their lives because they're not coming to me to ask me what their assignment is, what my commands for their situation in their life is. And, people just assume that some people just assume that things happen to them because it's just coincidental, or whatever. And God's no. I'm going to use every single event that happens in a person's life to be a teaching lesson, a teaching tool that they can use to hopefully go and teach other people what they learned. So it's I was allowed to feel his heart in how people were wasting time. And I'm not saying that pridefully, because you guys, I'm completely aware, fully aware that I have wasted a lot of time in my life. And you can ask Jesus. This is something that I carry in my heart. It's a regret that I carry daily, and it's something that I use, that God's used to get me to self-examine every day of how am I using my time? I want to use my time wisely. You can ask Jesus. Even when I get in conversations, I'm asking God, Help me to have the conversations that you want had in this moment. Help me to not be distracted by different things, by the devil whispering or my own fears or things that rise up in my own heart, but help me to be that instrument that you need in this conversation, because I'm fully aware that every conversation, every interaction that we have with people is a gift, and God is going to use it as like a meeting, as this moment, if you will, to throw a stone into this water of life that will start a ripple, okay? And so it's like, that affects eternity. I've made other videos on this, you guys, but it's just something that I really am so sober on, and double checking, triple checking, like all day. Like, how can I use my time wisely, Jesus, you know, in this conversation, or when I'm going to visit with family, you know, or whatever's going on, okay? And I'm not saying I don't ever get distracted. I have. Like, God's had to pull me away from different things. And then there's been other times when God has had to pull me away from different assignments that he didn't want me partaking in that day. But because I do have such a heart, you guys, where I care about the suffering. Like, you can ask Jesus this. I care so much about the sufferings. And because I myself have suffered so much in my life when I was a child up until like today. And I still go through so many health ailments and everything. This is why I have this channel, because I don't want people to feel the pain that I felt in moments when I felt all hopelessness, and like there's no water for my soul in these moments when I felt like I was alone. And, you know, so I make these videos and I talk about this stuff because I care for people. And so there's been times when God's had to even pull me away, because it's almost like my heart and soul wanted to just jump out there and help everybody, you know? Like, get over here. Let me just cradle you. Get over here, you know? And it's like, to where God even allowed me to get sick in moments, to have me bedridden so I wouldn't be so busy, right? Wanting to help people. And he would be like, look, you're doing too much. You're doing too much. I see your heart's in the right place, but you need to focus. I need you to focus on this. You know, I got people in your family right now and around you that need you, and I need you to be focusing on them. Or his most, I would say, number one command for me a lot when I get that way is like, he's like, rest. I need you to rest. And it's hard for me in moments, because there are so many who are in need. And because God pulled me out of so many pits, you guys, that it's like, it's like, because of Jesus Christ, he's given me like so much that I just want to give to people, right? And, you know, and I do, but I'm just saying, like, it's like God sometimes has to pull me back with the reins of like, whoa, you need to slow down. So I've had those kind of trials and stuff, but I'm making these videos because I care about people. I don't want people in pain, and I know that Jesus is the healer. And even saying that, pain is a teacher. That's also another teacher that has been in my classroom in my life, is pain. Okay, pain. Oh man. Pain is something that has taught me so much about how important these bodies are, these temporary bodies are that God has given us to use as tools, right? To use for his purpose every day, that people take for granted. And so, like, when I've had pain, that's what I've learned the most, is like, wow, this body is a gift. You know, I don't want to waste time. I want to be able to get healed so that I can go and do whatever God wants me to do and use my body for, whether it's to comfort the hurting or whatever. And even like enjoying a sunny day, you know, it's like all the little things that people take for granted, you know, health and pain and all this stuff. Pain is the teacher of that. That's what I've learned in my own classroom with God, in my own experiences, in God's teaching, and when he's taught me these lessons. And God's also taught me that, you know, everybody has, like I said, their own lessons in their own classrooms, and that, you know, I've been through a lot of painful experiences and stuff that no classroom could teach me. In other words, I'm not going to learn the stuff that I've already learned from something else. I learned it because God walked me through it and refined me. So he's taught me that, like, he's my teacher, and I wouldn't have learned these experiences on my own or from anybody else had God not walked me through this classroom himself. So it's no different for other people that go to Jesus. They have their own assignments, their own classrooms, their own growth of character and everything that God is working in them. And he's starting the good work, and he's going to finish it in his pupils. He will finish a good work in his students, and especially, obviously, those who are rooted in him and who continue to abide in him. And when they get knocked down, they're right there clinging to God and holding on to God, trusting God even when things just are blowing up everywhere else in their life, and they're clinging to God no matter what, and he teaches them so much. So I've really learned that suffering and pain has brought me closer to Jesus than a good day. And what I mean by that is like, it's a time to refine my character and to self-reflect and to really put myself in the shoes of the suffering when I'm suffering myself. So in those moments, that's when I get like such a download of God's like wisdom and knowledge and just on life and eternity and his heart and the hearts of others, and just how he is like molding all of this together, right, to work for good for his family. So it's definitely the times of suffering when I have felt the closest to my God. And then in times of rest, like today, God's having me rest, but even so, doing this video takes some work, but it's just coming natural to me because it's God's will and it's God's way and it's God's assignment for me right now. But what I mean by that is like, I'm not having any health ailments in the moment. I'm not having any horrific emotional or inner turmoil suffering or things, right now in my fire. This is a moment of rest in this very moment. I'm not saying that an hour from now it couldn't change. But so in this moment, I know that, like, even though I have the same understanding and knowledge that I did when I'm in the midst of suffering, it's not as heightened as it is when you're in the pain of it, when you're in the thick of it, right? When you're in the hot fire. It's like the soul screaming, all these different lessons, like coming at them like this, because they are suffering. But it's like in these moments, I like to just reminisce and try and get those things gathered and get them out to the world to shine God's light. So that's what this video is. The whole purpose was to talk about God's classroom. Okay, so that was one dream. I had another dream not too long ago. I'd say several months ago, maybe 5 months. Wow, 5 or 6 months now. Where I was back in my old high school, and I was walking around, because in high school, I would be a completely different person. Now, if God were to like drop me and put me back in time, I would be completely different. It's just the truth. Back then, I was like this child who was very sad and broken, and, so many different things going on. But the thing that remains the same is I was always an outcast. I was always different. Like, I knew something was different. And God was always, like, comforting me, counseling me, no matter what new schools I went to or houses I moved in neighborhoods and cities and stuff. Because I moved a lot. But I did have the inner turmoil. I had anger issues. I had demons that were living in me. Legions of demons that I had opened doors to because I was hanging out with people who were also a bad influence, and then I was also a bad influence on them. So I had turned to alcohol and, just self-medicating basically to try and escape reality. And I grew bitter. I was selfish. I was angry. But in saying that, I was very like quiet. I wasn't this kid who was out to like try and start a fight on purpose or anything like that. I'm not saying that I never did get into fights, because I did. Before high school, I did. I got into fist fights as a small child from the age of like 10 to high school. And I got into some verbal fights, that kind of thing in high school, but nothing physical. But in saying that, like, I was always like an outcast. I didn't feel understood. There was so much going on in my life, that it was hard for me to make friends, but I didn't want to be somebody that wasn't true to myself. In other words, I wasn't going to like try and become popular or try and become someone that I'm not in that way, because I didn't feel like I owed anybody anything to try and like, and I just didn't feel like the whole fake crowd was just a turnoff to me in so many ways, because I wanted to be around people who were real, who, even if they were in a bad mood, even if they were angry, they were real. You know what I'm saying? They aren't putting on this fake persona to get everybody to like them. So, like, even in my angered state, bitter state, in that way, I was always trying to find a friend or two that I could surround myself with that was like-minded. And so that's what I did. So I didn't have very many friends. I wasn't popular. I did play softball, but that was just to take out my anger and frustration physically, which did help mentally and a little bit emotionally, but I was still having to deal with, bullying and, just the whole popularity contest of feeling like you're not accepted, you can't find your place. So, I was that child, and I was just me. I just wanted to be me. And so, like, I was many different things that I'm not today. Like, I've grown from it, obviously. Like, in walking with God, He's healed me a lot. But in this dream, I know that if God were to drop me back into those days, that now the knowledge and everything that I have, that I could sit down with a really broken heart and be able to be a counselor and help to them however God would lead me. And that's the whole point in the dream, was to show me, like, God saying, okay, you went through the world's schooling, and that part, I'm going to use it all for good, all of your bullying and all this stuff for good, so that you can use it in my school as my student, and to go out there and to teach people the different lessons and experiences that you've learned in your classroom with me. So that's like what the dream was, and it was teaching me how, God would lead me to cross paths with maybe even people from my past, and even people I haven't met yet, to be a comfort and help to them. How, like, we can relate to each other. And then God also showed me in this dream that there were going to be other people going through similar tests and trials and classrooms that I've gone through. And then there were other of His students in their own classrooms and going through their own experiences and their own trials and things that they're learning on their own, while I'm learning things with God on my own. Because we all have just different family dynamics and things that in our life that we've learned and gone through, that we were just in our own classes. And it's not to say that one of God's students is a valedictorian and the other one is stuck in LD or something. Because that was me in school. I was the LD student, and you guys, I could not connect, like, with a lot of the subjects and stuff. But if you wanted to talk about the heart, I could have done that all day long. I was a daydreamer. I stared out the window. I was having all these deep questions to Jesus all day long. Like, all day long. Even in my rebellion, I was constantly investigating and wanting and searching and seeking and wanting to know truth about things and people and all that stuff. So it's pretty amazing when you think about it, just how much God has really brought me through all of that. Even when I wasn't necessarily walking with Jesus and born again in those moments, because, like I said, I was still in a rebellious state, listening to the devil, giving into my flesh and sinning, and feeling the weight of my sin. And so, like, it got heavier and heavier and heavier. So that's when I had my breaking point. Like, God literally, like, broke me and broke the pride, and that's His love. And then I was able to face my wicked heart and repent, right? So that's why I'm different now today than I was then. But I understand the sufferings of people, and I'm still learning the sufferings of people. But I understand now, and I have such a deep compassion and love for people who are going through their own things. Because if God has given me a nugget at all of counsel or wisdom or knowledge that can help them through their own trials, then obviously I want to make myself available to God's will and God's using, and to do His work and to help people. So then that was one dream. And even in my dream, I was sitting in an LD classroom. It's called learning disability. I was sitting in this classroom, just kind of sitting there, feeling lost and out of place. And Jesus came and sat down next to me, and he was drawing on my hand, like with a pen. Because when I was a child, me and my friends used to do that. We would draw on each other's hands and stuff, if we were bored. And so Jesus drew like a silhouette of my face, and then he drew some hearts and stuff. And he was like encouraging me, and he smiled at me. And he was letting me know, like, I don't have a learning disability. I've been made to feel different from the world because I am different, because I'm his child. And I don't have a learning disability. Even though I couldn't do math probably above 8th grade level. Like, seriously, if you guys offered me billions of dollars, I couldn't do math above 8th grade level. And God's like, that's not a learning disability. That's just something you're not gifted in. And it was something I wasn't honestly even interested in. And there's also an emotional connection to math because my uncle, whom I was close to, who used to teach me math, and he'd sit down and do lessons, when I started getting really bad at math is when he died. So there's an emotional connection to it too. But my point is like God was like encouraging me in this dream and telling me, you don't have a learning disability. I'm going to use your story to teach many people things, lessons of my school, of my world, of my heart. And so he was just like, it was so encouraging, you guys. Jesus is so beautiful in that way. It was such a vivid dream. And God has given me another recent dream where I was in my classroom. Okay, yeah, this was amazing. I'm just going to try and make this as short as possible because I know I talk a lot. But in this third dream, okay, I'll just tell part of it. There's other parts that went on, but the main part that I remember that was so encouraging, so beautiful, is that I was in, like, before I was born, I was sitting with Jesus as a soul, and he was, like, preparing me to be born, and he wasn't telling me, like, exactly the things that were going to happen in my life, but he did tell me that I would suffer a lot. So he was, like, pep-talking me, and it's almost like God told me a lot. It's like he told me so much knowledge and understanding about certain things, about eternity, about earth, about all kinds of stuff you guys, like, he's all-knowing. So he told me a lot of understanding and wisdom in that moment and knowledge that it's like he has blinded me from completely remembering and understanding because it's part of my test. So, like, I saw myself as this little soul that was begging God to be born at the same time that he was preparing me to be born. So then I got to see how, like, the bigger picture of eternity, of my own life. And he showed me that I was in my own classroom, and my mom was even there. And my mom died a couple years ago, but she was even there. And God was talking to her, and she was in her own classroom with other people, and she was learning still. And so that, to me, tells me that even when a person repents and dies and goes to be with Jesus, they're still ever growing and still ever learning continually, right? Because God is a creator, and he's continually creating, and eternity is so huge, we can't even fathom all of the knowledge and wisdom that God has in all of that, in these little brains of ours, right? And apparently, even though this body falls and dies and the soul lives, and the soul that goes to live with God, even though they're eternal, they're still growing, right? It's like having to just transition from this life to the next, and then it's a continual growing. So that's what I saw, was how my mom was in her own classroom, and it was really encouraging and beautiful, and she was like cheering me on for my classroom here on earth. It was just such a beautiful dream, and there were different scenes in it that taught me different things about my life to, like, remind me, again, to refine me, and that God was using it to teach me things about different parts of my life, where I made mistakes or where I could have done better, and then other parts where he was encouraging me, saying, you did a good job here. Yes, you did a good job there. So it was like he was correcting me, and then also he was encouraging me. Yeah, it was just a beautifully balanced, encouraging dream. To where, like, in a moment when I felt like, oh man, I got that test wrong or I failed that test, God was right there to be like, yeah, but you passed this one. Or in a sense of like, but be encouraged because now you have this knowledge from failing this test to pass the next one. So it's like he was very teachable and loving and encouraging in that way. And I got to feel how my interactions with people made God feel or made them feel, like if I ever said things that hurt people or if I ever did things. And it was like he was playing these different scenes in my life that went back to my past and then to the present, and he was just showing me like, you know, this is what this ripple did in this person's life, and just how everybody is affected by everyone in some way, shape, or form. If you're communicating with people in some way, shape, or form, or if you're in anybody's life, every life touches another. Yeah, so it was deep and it was beautiful. Didn't know this video was going to be this long, but I hope that God used it to encourage you to seek Jesus as your teacher, to become active in your own classroom with God, and really ask Jesus what he wants you to learn in your life. You guys, there's so many lessons, so many tests, so many trials, so many fires, things that people really can't even comprehend how huge of a plan God has for your life unless you go to Jesus for yourself. You won't learn this. You won't learn the entirety of Jesus through even me speaking about him unless you yourself go to Jesus for yourself. So it's like I feel God's heart grieving about that. How people are just kind of like still wasting time, and God's like, I am so full of gifts, so full of lessons that can help people grow and shine my light and help others and change situations for good and save lives. And there's people who are wasting time throwing paper airplanes across their classrooms, not, twiddling their thumbs, not even acknowledging the big plans that I have for them right here. And then I also feel God's heart about like how he's angry at how he gave his life so that he could pour all of this love, all of these lessons, and share it with people who would trust him and abide in him, and people are wasting that. Anyways, I just want to encourage you to seek Jesus with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Get in your own classroom with God. You guys, he's amazing. And I'm telling you, like, when you start suffering and the devil starts to attack you and give you hopelessness, cling to God harder. And just know that from my own story, I've been through so many hard, painful trials that God got me through it, and here I am. You can go watch my other videos to learn of some of those trials, and I'll be making more however God leads me. But be encouraged to know you can do this. You can put your mind, your heart, your strength into doing what God has you here to do for his sole purpose if you will trust Jesus. Okay, God bless.